Hello folks, thank you for joining. Just a couple of us in right now, but I'm sure that number will grow. It is the 2nd of June 2020. This is the VMware Cloud on AWS Customer Success Architect office hours, a name that just rolls off the tongue. Don't ask me to say it more than once because I struggle with one. Thank you for joining. We're back on Twitch this week, which is good. We had a bit of a technical hiccup the week before last, so we couldn't quite make the live Twitch stream, unfortunately. So we did manage to post it up to YouTube. So apologies if you were signing in to watch via Twitch last week. You were missed. Online currently we have Zach and DeMarcus and Darren from our support organisation as well. Just a couple of things for me to talk about this week. Not a huge amount. I did have a week off last week, so I was taking advantage of some leave with the family and the weather. So I haven't been up to much myself of late. A couple of things have come up already this week, though, that I will sort of broach as a subject. But the main one, I guess, for us to talk about that I'd like to bring up is the recent push of a feature that we've discussed previously, but not actually gone into any detail about, and that is the automatic adjustment of the VSAM policy. So something that came out a few days ago on May the 29th. This seems to have generated possibly more questions than any other feature of. I don't know about the rest of you, but I seem to have spent some of my time off, just before time off, some of my time off, and the first few days of this week answering questions about this, and I'm not entirely sure why. So I thought it'd be decent, 5-10 minute conversation to just go into and talk about in a bit more detail. I don't know about the rest of you guys. Zach, DeMarcus, Asaf, Pablo, if you've had any questions about this at all, this VSAM policy sort of automatic adjustment feature we've rolled out. Has anyone had any questions about this, or is it just my customers are kind of eagle-eyed and spotted the change?
Yeah, I haven't had anybody bring it up yet.
Neither have I.
Oh, you're so lucky. Honestly, I think I've spent so much time going into. So let me cover it off what it is initially. But I just wanted to say hi to JWalt3, who's joining us live via Twitch today. Thanks for joining. If you have any questions, or indeed anyone else has any questions, feel free to post them into chat, Q&A, or if you're on Zoom and I've unmuted you, feel free to just shout out. So yeah, the auto adjustment of VSAM policies. This has come about as we've noticed as the consumption of the platform has grown. That most people start out with a 3-node cluster, and they have a lot of workloads. They might just leave with the default VSAM policy, which at the time is set at one thing, and then as the environment grows, you should really start managing your VSAM policies a bit more. But for those that don't want to and are just happy to leave workloads running on the default, that caused a bit of an issue as the clusters grew beyond the 5-6 node count, and you had you kind of had issues with customers running on the wrong policy. They're suddenly not eligible for SLA credits, which we'll dive into in a minute. So the BU have come up with a mechanism to monitor your cluster size and change the default vSAN storage policy, or I think it's the managed storage policy as it's called, to reflect the right SLA compliant model. So that's basically, if you have less than 5 hosts, you need your default VSAM policy to be failures to tolerate of 1 and RAID 1 or greater. So this is a minimum requirement. Okay, so it doesn't have to exactly match, so long as it is this policy but with a greater failures to tolerate number. And if you are greater than 6 hosts, this is in a a non-stretched cluster, by the way, then you have to have failures to tolerate or FTT of 2 using RAID 6. And then if you have stretched clusters, then you need to enable dual site mirroring and have failures to tolerate of 1 and RAID 1, which has a fairly large storage volume. So what I've asked for is clarity in the documentation that's been produced around this, but you just have to remember a couple of points, I guess, and that is primarily this is for SLA credit eligibility. So if, for example, if there's a problem that causes an outage and your virtual machines have the SLA eligible policy set against them, then we will provide you with credits where we've impacted your service due to an outage beyond your control. If you are running with your VMs having a different storage policy attributed to them, it doesn't mean you won't be supported, and I need to stress that point a bit. It just means that you won't necessarily be able to claim SLA credits unless you're using one of these policies or better, in the words of the BU. So the same policy but with a greater level of failures to tolerate. Does that make sense to everybody? Has everybody kind of grasped that concept? As always, silence is acceptance.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. You are all on mute half the time, so it takes you a few seconds to come off. So it's just I don't know why, but I just seem to have had maybe 20 or 30 conversations about this in the last few days alone, and it just seems to be I don't know, not contentious, but an interesting point that has sparked a lot of conversation. So for me, I don't think it's a drastically complicated thing. I just think that maybe people are confusing SLA compliance with support, and people were panicking thinking that if they weren't using the correct VSAM policy, they wouldn't be supported. I don't really know. It is purely for credit eligibility. Now there is, if you Google VMC SLA, the first link you come to, or second link now, is the service level agreement for VMware Cloud on AWS. And on page 2, this we detail what the requirements are. So in a little bit more detail, it just maps out what that policy is. Now, if you are running different policies, like we recommend you do, we advise you do, for different workloads, for example, databases. So if you are running, say, RAID 6 on a stretched cluster, that's going to give you some storage saving, but it's not necessarily the most performant of policies. So you might be running different policies for different use cases, and that is completely acceptable. And what we're not going to do is change any of those custom created policies. We're literally just going to manage the managed storage policy. Okay, I think I've done that to death, but if anybody does have any other questions about it, feel free to just shout and ask. We do have a question in Q&A as well, which I will get to in a sec.
So for this, so this has just been implemented. Let's say someone had like a 16 host cluster that was right up against the 68% storage.
Yes.
And there is some overhead when you change, even though I believe RAID 6 is supposed to use less storage than RAID 1, even
yes.
with the FTP.
So erasure coding is kind of 1.3 or 1.5 times rather than.
Yeah, but there, as far as I know, and I think this has been improved, but there's some overhead while it's doing.
There is,
change.
yes. Yeah.
So is there some sanity check to make sure it doesn't try to add a host?
It is a good question. And the honest answer is I'm not entirely sure, because 16 node is the hard limit. You cannot manually scale beyond 16 nodes in a cluster, right? Whether that be single node or single site or stretched. However, Autoscaler can push you beyond 16 nodes. So it's an interesting question, and if we automatically change this, and then it automatically pushes you beyond the 25% slack space required in vSAN, then it's going to provision you another host automatically, right? So it's a good question. I don't know if it staggers them. When I talked to the BU about this before, they did say they'd made improvements on how it gets rolled out so that it wouldn't do this, but I don't have the numbers. I haven't seen evidence of what they've done to stop it, getting Autoscaler to kick in, basically. It'd be good to find out. I'll see if I can dredge up some more information on it, and come back to you. I will take that as a note for next week. Oh, sorry, next session. But yeah, it is interesting. The other thing that I don't know is what the exact overhead is. So obviously it's going to do some kind of rebalance and create more objects if you change the policy, even if you change it to one that is more efficient from a storage perspective. So there will be a slight increase. And then I don't know how long that increase runs for before it then reduces down. I don't know if any of you guys are aware of that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know they made improvements to really reduce that slack space in the newer versions of VSAM.
Yeah. So in future versions of VSAM, the slack space will no longer be a percentage either. It'll be a fixed amount per node. So hopefully there'll be a lot less overhead when you get into larger cluster sizes. Okay, and the only other update on there on the May the 29th was the auto remediation of host notifications. Now, with the notification gateway enhancements that were made fairly recently, they're adding in more and more notifications as we go. So what you'll now see in the notification section is when there's been some auto remediation tasks happened around hosts, for example. So when an issue's been detected with a host, when a problematic host has been remediated, and when we've replaced a host either because it was problematic or due to an AWS maintenance event. So what that will appear in is either if you've configured the notification gateway to send out messages via Slack or other kind of stuff using webhooks, then you'll see them there, and you'll also see them in your notification section, which I've no doubt been signed out of by now, so I've left it too long, but I'll show you in a sec. What you won't get though for those events is you won't receive, so there you go, in your activity log is where you'll see those new events. What you won't get for these though is you won't get any email notification. It's purely the notification gateway stuff. Okay, so if there are no other questions, there was a question I believe has now been answered around when the 2-node cluster will be available. Thanks Asaf for picking that up. Was it so we have an anonymous attendee, was that because you're looking to deploy, are you waiting for the 2-node to be available for you for production use, or is it something that you're just inquiring about right now? Feel free to drop her.
Yeah. So this is Vincent Hetzberger. I'm from Moody's. I just did anonymous.
Hey Vincent. No worries.
I'm not trying to hide.
Ninja din, yeah.
But no, the 2-node host it looked good to us because we were going to use 2-node hosts for sandbox environment.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Not necessarily putting production workloads on it, but just using it for, let's say, a sandbox environment, maybe holding Windows or Linux or etc. But it's just basically having a small cluster, so if someone wanted to test something, they can just test it. I don't need to give them a 3-node cluster or 4-node.
Sure.
That's all.
No worries. I mean, you're right. It's not a production use platform right now anyway. It's kind of that interim between 1 node and a full 3-node deploy. Do you have any I mean, you'll have accounting, but do you have any customer success team assigned to you, any managers or architects? I'm not familiar with who's aligned to Moody's in the US.
He does. Hey,
Cool.
Vince, this is Andy Galea. I'm not sure if you remember me. It's been a little while.
Yeah, I do. Hey, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going?
He's all right.
So are you working? Who are you working with? Are you working with Brian?
Yeah, I work with, typically I work with Craig Taylor.
Oh, Craig.
And Zach.
Okay.
So I typically work with those guys. And like I said, I just ordered 3 hosts yesterday. I'm going to be ordering another 3, hopefully today or tomorrow. I was waiting on getting access to another bucket of credits So once I have that, then I'll be able to order three additional hosts. But yeah, I'll be setting up multiple clusters up there on VMC, and like I said, I was asking about the sandbox, but no big deal to me. I'll just create a 3-node cluster for the sandbox. We're basically relocating our entire sandbox environment from on-prem to the to VMC.
Nice. Yeah, I'll reach out to Craig and Zach, and then I'll get them to follow up with you on timelines for that one, just in case.
Yeah, and I have a call with these guys today, so I'll be
okay, perfect.
I'll be talking to these guys today at 12. So
hey, great talking with you again, Vince.
Yep, same.
Thanks, Andy. So yeah, I hope you've got an answer there, Vince. But you can feel free to reach out to the team later and bring it up if they can get you on the preview. So I'm just checking the various chat windows, see if there's any other messages come through. Nothing as yet. What we are going to talk about today is Zach has been doing some work that he wants to just kind of talk us through, I guess, really some API work with the IPsec VPN. I don't know if you want to share your screen, Zach, or you're going to drive mine. It's up to you.
Yeah, I can share.
Cool. I will just drop this.
All right.
Cool.
Yeah, so this is a specific a customer had asked to change the BGP timers on VPN. So by default, it's 60/180. It's the hold down, and I can't remember the other thing it's called. But the only way to do that is so what that does is it'll change it so if you have connectivity, lots of connectivity, it will flush the routes quicker to bring down that, so it doesn't try to use the VPN, and you can fail back over to direct connect. And the use case is like in their situation was a VPN between SDDCs. So if that goes down, then it will go back over the direct connect. And in a situation, it'd have to route, back on-prem and back up the direct connect between sites. So it's useful in a worst case scenario, I guess. And the way to do that is to change through the API. You can use any, whatever, Python, or write your own scripts and stuff to do that. But the easy way is to use a developer console in VMC. And the way to do that is you just go into your VMware Cloud on AWS, and then CSP. And then just click on Developer Center on the left here, and then API Explorer. And you will have available APIs, VMware Cloud Services. This would be I really haven't looked at that one, but this is what we want to look at here. The VMware Cloud on AWS API. So then you pick your SDDC. I haven't tested this since we went to M11, so hopefully it works.
It was a demo, so something will go wrong.
Yeah, so then we want to select the NSX VMC Policy API. And then from here, I just search BGP. And this really only applies, as far as I can tell, to the VPNs. Actually, I didn't realize they nuked it. I might have to create a VPN real quick, but we can find out if there's any VPN set up by using this git command. So this will get a list of your BGP neighbors. So the tier 0 ID is VMC, and that's going to be for everyone.
So that's the same across the board, right? Everyone, regardless of SDC.
And then the locale service ID is going to be default.
Hey Zach, I'm sorry I stepped away. I don't know if you needed something specific.
Nope.
All right.
Execute. So then that gets your BGP neighbor config list. So let's open that and see what happens. Yeah, so there's nothing in there right now. So let me make a VPN real quick. We'll just make a fake one. Yeah, I guess no one told me they did it, or I wasn't paying attention. So we'll say well, I guess it doesn't matter. We'll just do that is not. Oh, not 32. There we go. And this is all just made up stuff. So as long as that saves, cool. All right, so now we can go back here. Now we should see our neighbor. There we go. So we have a lot more stuff in here. The important thing to note will be this ID. That's your neighbor ID. So if you have more than one VPN, they'll all be populated under this section, and they'll all have a separate unique ID. So first, let's copy this ID. And then we want to go down to patch. So there's a put and a patch. So put, the difference in a REST API is a put basically would take the body and basically replace the config entirely. With a patch, you can update only the specific things that you want. In this case, we only care about updating this keep alive and hold down timer section. So in order to do that, we'll just do, so it's going to be VMC default, and then we have our neighbor ID. And then the part we need to update is going to be this. These first 4 lines are required. So paste that in. It puts it all in one line. So then we also want to make sure we have the curly brace in front. Delete that comma off the end. And we'll execute. And it says execute will cause modifications. Are you sure? Sure. Status 200. So that looks good. And we'll come back.
Is it just me, or did you not change anything in that? You just copied and pasted in.
Oh yeah.
Thought I was going mental there for a minute.
No, that's just me. So yeah, that's a simple. So yeah, I would just put it down. So with BGP, typically want it to be like a multiple of 3 or 3 times whatever your keep alive is. Your hold down is going to be 3. So we'll do 30/90.
Do we know what the minimum and maximums there are, so we don't put something in
1.
stupid? 1 and 3.
You could do 1/1. But then if you do 1/1, then it's basically after 1 keep alive, it's gonna reset.
Yeah.
So like on-prem in SX world, well, now you can use BFD usually, but we would set it to 1/3.
Okay.
Yeah, you could do 1/1 if you really want to get crazy.
Yeah, and Zach, would you have to make that same change on the on-prem side?
Yeah, they have to match.
Okay.
If you're doing this against AWS, I think it might automatically pick that up. I know AWS does some stuff like that where it just kind of sees what you put in and matches it. But you'd have to test that or verify.
Yep.
All right, so pull the neighbor out, and then we can see keep alive and hold down are set to 30/90.
Cool.
That's about it. But yeah, this just in general, the policy or the API is pretty cool. You could come in here and really, I think it should have full parity with everything that's in the documentation at this point.
I think the it's API first as well, so anything you can do in the GUI, you can definitely do via the API Explorer as well.
Yeah.
Well, the thing I like about this is I'm not natively an API guy. I'm not a programmer or anything. So for someone like me, this makes it really easy to get the information out via API and make changes. So if you're regularly using something like Postman or something, you can perform all those activities from here as well, right? Just in a sort of a GUI API format.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's handy for short little things, but
Yeah.
if you want to get more, if you want to start doing automation or something, you definitely want to learn Python or something.
Yeah.
Is that when you make that type of change, does that cause the tunnel to bounce?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I haven't tested that. It should be whatever BGP standard is, so it might just renegotiate the timers and not bring it down. If it does, I wouldn't think it'd be for very long.
Yep.
Yeah, as always, do changes and assume the worst, I guess.
Yep.
All right.
Cool. Well,
Have any
thanks for that,
questions,
Zach. Really useful. Yeah, I'm good on questions. I don't know if anybody
Okay.
else has any. Just check out the Q&A. Oh, somebody's raising their hand. Who's that?
That was a quick. That was my bad.
No worries, Vincent.
All right, cool.
Cool. Thank you. So we, for myself, as I said earlier, I don't have a huge amount to talk about this week because, as my colleagues will tell you, once again I was off last week. So what I will do is I'll jump into the bit of a roundtable, or actually we'll just reach out if anybody has any questions right now. Any of the attendees on Twitch or on Zoom, if you have any questions or any points you'd like to raise. Actually, JWalt3, yeah, there is a Zoom meeting for these in the future. You're more than welcome to join via Zoom. Gives you the opportunity to ask that question yourself live. Could somebody do me a favour so that I don't lose my screen in your in my email, Sig? If you can just paste the link to sign up to these webinars into chat for me, and then I can move it over to Twitch, and then I'll get that for you, JWalt. Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else? Any of the other attendees want to ask any questions? Have any points they want to raise? If not, we will move on to the roundtable and find out what people have been working on. Cool, thank you, Pablo. I'm just posting this in Twitch for you now, JWalt. There you go. You should be able to register via that link in the future. You'll get a unique Zoom invitation. So if any of your colleagues want to join as well, just send them that registration link rather than forwarding your invite on. Okay, nobody wants to join, so I will do a bit of a round table. We'll start at the top today with Asaf. Just find out what you've been looking at and working on. It'd be anything cool.
I don't know if anything cool. I know you and I talked about yesterday about as kind of to continue the discussion we had several weeks ago about stretch clusters and kind of pinning workloads
Yes.
to specific specific
Sides of
sites
the
or
stretch,
ACs.
yeah.
So kind of this a discussion that myself and some other CSAs in the teams were having about how to effectively do that for that's not super manual. So I can definitely share that if you want. So what I've been working on is basically a script. It's a Power CLI script that all it does at the moment, and I'm looking to add some more functionality to it. But in the meantime, it creates tags that will associate a host with a site and allows for it to be done kind of in a streamlined fashion that is not manual to go per host. What we talked about, just in case from the caller not aware, with a stretch clusters, basically we have two sites, and we have the concept of a preferred site and a non-preferred site. Now, when we are dealing with stretch clusters in an on-prem environment, we leverage DRS to do that. So we create DRS groups that pin a VM, or so a VM has a preferred host group to run on, and we just create a host group per site, and that's pretty much it. But that is because it's relatively simple, relatively straightforward, because most of the times on-prem, the hosts are static, whereas with VMC, the hosts are dynamic. The hosts sometimes, right now when we added it, it's still highlighted on the screen, the auto remediation host notification. Right now we have a bit more visibility to it from the CSP console, but it is also something that hosts can be added, hosts can be removed. It depends on how automated and streamlined the environment is, and manually managing that is not possible. On top of the fact that we don't have access to DRS, traditional DRS groups within VMC. So how we do it is with compute policies. So been working on something to kind of streamline that, so I can show that if you want.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant, mate. Let me just stop my share, and then you can jump on, share yours. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. Sharing my screen now. Let's go. Can you see my screen?
Yep, see that? Tiny, but we can see it. You've got a big wide screen, have you?
Yes.
Okay.
I can potentially zoom in. Let me know if it's better.
It's yeah, it's much better.
Okay, so what we have here is we do have a stretch cluster in our testing environment. It does only have 2 hosts. So just to kind of reiterate and show what we're doing, if we go to the cluster itself and go to configure and fault domains under VSAM, we can see here which fault domain is the preferred and which is the non-preferred. And just so you know, it is possible to kind of decide at creation which one is going to be the preferred, and that is basically the first AZ that is being selected when you create a new stretch cluster. So when you select two subnets, the first one that you will select, that one will be the preferred. Now, in terms of how do we control that with placement of virtual machines, so we have two ways of doing so, and they're both done through policies and profile. So the first one is when we have the storage policies, and this is where we will decide where the VM data might reside. Now, most of the times we would like to have the VM replicated, so we can just place it on a stretch policy, and that's not a problem. Sometimes we can, if we have a VM that we don't necessarily want to replicate, so we only want, and that is great for test workloads, or if it's there the application is already protecting and replicating to the other side, and we don't want to have just duplication of the data, then we can decide to pin a VM to either the preferred or non-preferred side. This only pins the data of the virtual machine, not the compute. So in order to do that for the compute, we need to go to compute policy, and different from what everyone might be used to from DRS, this is done solely based on tags. I cannot select just a list of the VMs and a list of hosts. So I need to make sure what is the tag, and what is the tag for the VM and what is the tag for the host, and then it will create an affinity between them. Similarly, it's how you will do things with VM anti-affinity and etc., like we would do with DRS. Now the question is, how do we tag everything? So what I created is basically two very simple commands. It's I will send you a link to this, so you can put this in the notes later, and I can also share it with everyone here. It's on GitHub. It's a par CLI module, so there's nothing fancy about that. And all it does, and I can show it. Here. Let me just delete the one that was created, which of course means it won't work right now because it's a demo, so things never work.
The curse of the demo?
Yes. So it signed me off, so let me just get the credentials there. So these are what I created is two modules, two functions. One of them is creating a tag per stretch cluster. So it will go, it will connect to the SDDC, and it will find out which one is which cluster is a stretch cluster, because depending on the type of SDDC, we might have a mix between some clusters are stretched, some are not. This is possible with the i3s, not with the R5s. So it will go and do that. And then, so this is one command that will create those. And the second one will assign those to the host. So, so you can see here, this is the first part of the command. This is the new multi-AZ tags. So it will go and find what are if there's a tag category created. So how tags work, there's a tag category and each one has tags. So by default, I created a category that's called multi-AZ sites. You do have the option of naming your own category if that's something that you want. And then under that category, it will create tags that are the name of the cluster preferred and the name of the cluster non-preferred. And the description will tell you what is what is the AZ. Now it's important not to change those because the second script relies on that. So it's for your information, but also it's required for it to work. And then the second command basically goes and finds all the hosts in those clusters and then associates them with the right tag based on their fault domain. So this is, as you can see here, it tells, okay, these are the hosts that we've done, and this is the tags that was assigned to them. And if we try to run it again, for example, it will verify if it's there before. So if I just run it on it, it will say there's already a tag. It's skipping that. Now at the moment it's only creating the tags, so we can go and you can go and run this either periodically or every time that you know that you're going to after you add hosts, because again this is static. It's only for the hosts that are there right now. So if there's any change, it will need to be re-implemented. I have talked to several people in the BU, and I didn't have a chance to confirm it yet, but they said that if a host fails and replaced by a new host, the old tags will be associated with that new host as part of the workflow of adding it there. So for host failures, it's nothing that you should worry about. I still need to test it, but just know that when you're adding host, or if EDRS will add a host. So it's something that you can either run on a schedule. It's something that I'm starting a test on that next week. This week, hopefully I'll have time to do that with the VMware event-based appliance, to basically run this anytime there's an add host event, and then you don't have to run it once a day. It's just
that's the fling, right? That's the
yes,
available.
It's a fling. Yeah. So and after that, so once we have the categories, it's just a matter of going to the compute policy, and that is also something that I want to add here to create the compute policy as part of this. But basically VM to host affinity, and if we'll call that cluster 1 multi-AZ, and basically just assign the same AZ, I should say preferred. Sorry. So preferred here, create, and then we will need to create another one that is the non-preferred. That will be this. But this is something that you only need to do once. And then, of course, tagging the virtual machines, which is something that is just a single command to just create, new tag assignment, and it's one parcli command assignment, and that's it. And that can be run either as a with CSV or a list array, whatever you prefer. The thing that we talked about it a lot is the reason the preferred site does have priority in case of if there's a link issue between the two AZs, and even if both AZs are up, the preferred site will always have quorum. So basically, the witness will shut down everything in the non-preferred site, even though all the hosts are running, but we have no way of guaranteeing consistency that way. So all the VMs will be restarted on the preferred site. So that is why you might want to sometimes pin the more important virtual machines to the preferred site anyways, even if they're replicated, just in case to protect them from unnecessary restart that way. It's quite an edge case, and highly unlikely that it will happen, but it's just extra precaution there.
Also a reason for keeping an eye on your consumption of CPU and memory, right? So if you did have that edge
Yes.
case occur, and all those workloads were restarted in the preferred site, then you know you don't want to be in a
Of course.
situation where you run out of resource.
Exactly. And it might be usually when you want to pin a VM to a specific site, we're thinking if the VM is not replicated, but it also comes if you have VMs that are replicated, but they're two different nodes of a cluster, and you want to make sure that they definitely reside on different sites. So this is a way to pin them that way. It's just something that we're so used to do it, and we have a workflow to do it on-prem, and it's just something that we need to bring into VMC and consume more easily. The functionality is there, so that's kind of what I was looking to do here.
Cool. Well,
This
thanks
is all
for that.
on GitHub, so it's all right here, waiting to be downloaded. And I will update once if I do add functionality. At the moment, the one thing I want to add is if we are going to be successful with the test with the event-based appliance, to be able to specify the host, but also again to potentially, as part of this command, to also create the policies. But that's just, it's not in native to parse CLI yet. I'll have to do it through API, so it's just a slightly different workflow.
Cool, thank you for that. Also, for anybody watching on YouTube, I will post the link to Asaf's GitHub page in there as well. That looks really good, mate. Thank you.
Okay, there's not any question. That's everything I was working on. Other than that, wasn't as exciting. So
I think what you've also done is you've saved a lot of people, because unless people don't have much to update, you've just burnt through the last 20 minutes. Interestingly. Yes. But you've saved everyone the round table today. So thank you again for that, Asaf. Any questions for Asaf there at all? Anybody? No? Cool. That was there was no problems. That was perfect. Brilliant. So, DeMarcus, hello, sir.
Hey, Will. Yeah, I got something I can share with the group. So I've been spending some time with a customer deploying the vCenter Cloud Gateway. So that they can get hybrid link mode deployed, or configured, I should say. And we were running into some certificate issues. We were not quite sure what was happening. And then after about a week of troubleshooting, we found that and this is not documented very well, but we found that the vCenter Cloud Gateway does not support wildcard certificates. So what happened was this customer had they had two vCenters on-prem, and they had that in enhanced link mode enabled.
Yep.
And on one of those vCenters, they had a wildcard certificate configured. And so when we downloaded the OVA and deployed the vCenter Cloud Gateway, everything was green until we tried to connect the Cloud vCenter server, and we kept getting this message. And it came out to be that it was a wildcard certificate on one of the PSCs. Once we removed that wildcard certificate that was not in use, it was configured on their vCenter, but it was not in use. Everything was working properly. So if you for customers out there, if you run into any issues like that, you two things to look out for: make sure you're not using a wildcard certificate, and also make sure the certificate is not expired.
Cool, good tip. Thanks, Mr. Mac. Yeah, really good. I guess that certificates have been the bane of VI admin's life for quite a few years now, right? So it doesn't surprise me that it rears its head again in VMC land. So thanks for that. Pablo, anything you've got that you'd like to add at all?
Hi. Yeah, actually there is something interesting for me, because it's not so cool and fancy as the other presentations that we have in this call, but it's something that you didn't realize the importance that it have until you are asked for, and it's about change the VPC assignment to the SDDC after you do the deployment,
Okay.
which is something that we are not able to do, or
Yep.
in some our document it says it's not possible, but it is. So it's something, it's not of our out of our process or whatever, but the customer or we just need to open a ticket and ask to change for that. The
So
only
so if
thing,
we are opening a ticket, then theoretically it's
yeah,
a supported thing.
yeah, it is. It is something that they can do, and they do already. So it happened the last week, and I was asking about that, and it's real. We can do it. It's supported. So the only thing that we need to follow is one rule, and it has to be on the same AC on the first VPC. I mean, for example, if the customer wants to change this for another VPC, another AC, even on the same region, it's not possible. Okay. So the subnet that we need to provide the SDDC. We need to change the VPC, the subnet, which will create the ENI, as we already know, with the VPC, and that has to be a VPC on the same AC. So the subnet needs to be on the same AC, which is something quite interesting because I don't know anyone can have any reason to change that because they need to delete something or they create something or you made a mistake creating the VPC or something like that. Because when you are trying to delete it, you can't because there are some networking, let's say hard-coded
Yep.
on the deployment, and you can't delete that through the panel. So the first idea is just to delete the SDDC and create again to the right VPC or something like that, but you don't need to do that. Okay, so it's something that I think it's really interesting right now.
So what was the
So
use case that led you to find that out? Was it a mistaken VPC creation or what?
yeah, it was let's say someone decided to use the wrong subnet. Okay.
Okay.
So at the end, it's I think it was a mistake because when you really don't understand what means to choose that subnet, it's not about you will send the traffic through that subnet. It's just only to say to the SDDC, which is the VPC, where you are linking through the ENI.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe there is some confusion on that for many people because choosing the subnet is not choosing the subnet as it is. It's just linking one VPC with the SDDC. It's only for that. It's to say this is the right VPC. Okay, because for example you can have, as you know, 10 subnets which are linked to the same VPC. So
Yeah.
it's the same which subnet you use. Okay, it's just to say to the SDDC which is the right VPC. Okay, so the problem was that in this case customer understand that the subnet was through the traffic it will flows. Okay, and it was not correct. Okay, so I think
Cool.
that's interesting.
Yeah. No.
And also
Really
it's
interesting. I didn't know it was possible either. So.
yeah, me neither. But doing some research and trying to understand not to delete again the SDDC, okay, because the customer already did 2 or 3 times.
Wow.
It's like there is no way to do that. Okay, let's do some research and investigate further if we can do it or not. Because in some documents it's not clear, and in other document it's like you can do it. Is because you can do that on the console, but it doesn't mean it's not possible to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, which is really different. So at the end, it's like how you understand what you read.
So is there any
So I
point
think
then where doing that would be not advisable? You know,
yeah,
somebody's so far down the journey of deploying and utilizing. At which point, where's the break point where that just becomes
yeah,
a bad idea?
yeah. The other thing is for example, it has to be scheduled. Okay,
Yeah.
so our support team will set a slot when you open the ticket to decide when it has to be done because it needs to reboot some of the management components of the NSXT side, so it will affect a bit to the SDDC.
Sure.
Okay, it's not just to delete the configuration and connect it again. Okay, so it's only that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, interesting.
I'll also
Thanks.
add one thing to that that might be interesting because you mentioned that it has to be in the same AZ.
Yep.
So it's really important to see, and that is and how AWS sometimes presents thing is that for different users, you will get the AZ is not, it's generated per user, the name of the AZ. So for example, if I log in, I might see a certain subnet as US West 1A, but you will see it as US West 1B.
Yeah.
And sometimes because the SDDC is in a VMware managed account, sometimes we will see that the AZ we see in the connected VPC is not the same AZ number that we see from our own AWS console, but it's very easy to identify it with what is the correct AZ with the subnet identifier. So just if someone is creating a new VPC and wants to and just says like, oh, this one is in 1A, I'll just create it in 1A.
Makes sense.
So just double check that, but that is something that needs to be double checked anytime, and it's unfortunately nothing we can control over.
Yeah, it is. I always say the same. It's like check the subnet is configured on the AC that you want. So go to the AWS console, let's say, and check it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we had some customers
Point.
that were not aware of that, and it was like I deployed it in specifically wanted it in 1A, but in the console I see it as 1B. So.
Yeah, so request this change is not the best way to do it, okay? Because it's like when we request for the soft limits, you can ask for an exception if you have a good reason behind that, something like that. But it's something that could be done. Okay, so.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, gents. Really, really useful. Really interesting. I'm going to relax my request on Zach for any updates because he's clearly been working on his API stuff. But if you do have anything else you've been looking at this week, it'd be good to share.
No, that was kind of the one interesting thing I looked at this last couple of days.
Cool. Well, listen, everybody, thank you for joining. I'm just one last shout out, see if there's any questions from the Zoom or Twitch folks who are streaming in. If not, I'll thank you again for your time presenting and answering questions. And I'll speak to you in a couple of weeks. Hopefully we'll have maybe a demo on some HCX command stuff from one of the team as well. No promises. Like a roadmap, we might be ready, we might not. But yeah, I look forward to speaking to you all again in a couple of weeks. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you. Bye.